Well, a warm welcome to everybody from wherever you're joining us, whether it's from around the Asia Pacific region or from around the world. It's great to welcome you to yet another webinar. So this week we're going to focus on contact tracing and top tech trends. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers this week, which are going to be Dr. Andy and Alan. So each week we are trying a little slightly different format. Last week we had a guest speaker join us to talk about the cruise line industry, and this week we're going to also have two speakers, and then as we mentioned, next week we're going to do Q&A. So a little bit different each week. Alan has got a long experience in hospitality and tourism industry in Australia, having run his own school for many years in Perth in Western Australia. And Dr. Andy is originally from the US, has lived and worked in a whole range of different countries. One of my former colleagues worked with me for many years here in Malaysia. So it's great to have both of you on this week's webinar.
Excellent. Let's see.
Thank you, Perry. Yes, great to be here.
Great to be here.
Before we set off, I'd just again like to thank our sponsors. We've just started doing these off our own bat. So our sponsors in particular, Lyceum University in the Philippines, LPU, who've had the pleasure of visiting many times. So LPU, thank you very much. Also to the University of Santo Tomas, the oldest university in Southeast Asia, as I recall. Thank you very much again for your support. To the Macau Tourism and Hospitality Association, which covers the institutions in Macau that teach hospitality and tourism. So a big welcome to you and to the students from those different institutions and faculty members. And also to National Kaohsiung Tourism and Hospitality. It's wonderful to have the guys from Incoot in Taiwan support us. So again, thank you very much. And I believe you've got a new master's degree program as well. So wonderful to have your support. And again, any other institutions that would like to join in supporting what we're doing, that would be fantastic. And we look forward to hearing from you.
And we also have quite a few schools that we're in contact with about sponsoring, so we hope to have more sponsors in the future.
And it's great to have students, as we've just been talking about in the pre-show, from India, from Korea, from the Philippines, from Malaysia, from Thailand. So we've got students from a range of different institutions and countries. So it's great to have you all as part of our show. And each week we try and, as I said, do something different. And we hope that each week this is going to be interesting, engaging, current, up to date. So what I'd like to do now is to turn for our first presentation to go to Alan in Western Australia. Alan, it's great to see you back again this week and to talk about 5 top tech trends. As we've spoken about in previous webinars, tech has been a big feature of what's coming up. We spoke about smart tourism a couple of weeks ago. So Alan, tell us a bit more about what's going to be happening with tech trends in hospitality.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Perry Hobson, and also Dr. Andy, and I'm hoping that my screen is well shared. And of course, a very good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to another 30 Minutes Talks, as we said before, International Tourism and Hospitality Series. Welcome also to, of course, the students and our sponsors, and to each of you joining us from, I'm not sure exactly, but we're saying around 13 or 14 different countries around the world. And today my presentation is 5 top tech trends in hospitality post-COVID-19. So this is our 6th week of offering the 30-minute talk series, and today I've taken my presentations from the first 4 weeks and thought it would be interesting to rank the top 5 tech trends in hospitality. And I want to present to you today what I believe to be the top 5 tech trends that are affecting our industry now, and probably even more so in a post-COVID-19 world. Once again, as has become a little bit of a ritual at the start of each of my presentations, I want to give a little bit of a tourism plug for Perth, Western Australia. And there's a question in this for you. Please use the chat box if you'd like to answer this. Feel free to get involved. Answer the question. What is the name of this cute little furry animal? And if you like, I'll give you a hint. It's part of the kangaroo family or the macropods family and lives only in a very small number of islands around Australia. And in fact, one of the islands that's very close to where I live here in Western Australia was actually given its name through this animal. So if you know the answer, put it in the chat box. It would be something interesting for us to have a look at. So as the world moves through stages of survival and recovery due to COVID-19, that is, the world economy has moved from the stop phase to the trough phases, and now many are starting to move into the rebound phase and more towards an environment of health and hygiene. I want to explore a little bit more today about how technology is enabling hotels and the hospitality industry to provide basic and new guest services. It is also my view that whilst the world does not have a vaccine or a cure for COVID-19, we are still largely dependent on a number of social distancing regulations and the use of personal protection equipment, and maintaining a high standard of hygiene as best as we can. For the industry and the people around the world, this also means reducing your touch or contact points as much as possible in order to minimize the risk to you. So my approach has been to explore how technology is assisting the industry in order to minimize the touch points or the contact points for guests. In other words, minimizing the risk of catching a virus during the stay at a hotel. So in week one, my presentation of What Now, What Next, I focused a little bit on innovation and the trends in the hospitality tourism industry and the types of innovative technologies that are transforming the way the hotels are currently doing business. I presented the assertion that hotels will need to look at their business models post-COVID-19 and will most likely need to do things differently. And in this respect, I think hotels that have generally been poor adopters of technology will need to change their mindset. In week two, I looked at delivering the guest customer experience in a post-COVID world. And during this presentation, I focused on the guest interaction during pre-arrival, that is the making the reservations, the arrival at the hotel and their check-in. And I explored virtual technologies that enabled the check-in and noted the importance of retraining staff in the use of PPE and in readiness for hotel openings post-COVID-19. The week after that, I looked at technology in a hotel room and maximizing the guest experience. During this presentation, I focused on maximizing the guest experience through services and amenities that are available to hotels and to guests in the hotel room. And the presentation explored the needs for hotels to focus on hygiene and considered a whole range of technologies that are available in rooms today that can assist with ensuring guest experiences are met with future needs, I guess, whilst also ensuring the trend for a greater hygiene in hotels is catered for. And then more recently, prior to our cruise ship tourism seminar last week, I looked at free Wi-Fi. Is Wi-Fi a necessity or a luxury? And so I focused on connectivity, the need to enable connectivity for technology to function, and indeed for our guests to function in this modern world. This topic has also been covered in a presentation by Professor Perry Hobson, where he spoke in quite a lot of detail about connectivity. We've all looked at the fact that in today's world, guests rate free Wi-Fi more importantly than free breakfast used to be. And I also gave you some good examples how personally you can experiment with near frequency communication technologies that will give you a better understanding of how technology functions and might assist you in your day-to-day lives if you work in a hotel or a restaurant. The example I showed you, I hope you all had the opportunity to explore a little further and see how NFC tags or near frequency communication tags might assist you. I hope that some of you had the opportunity and that you may have seen how those tags could make your jobs and the hotel's jobs a lot easier. So now for today's presentation and my top 5 tech trends, taking on from presentations that I've given over the last number of years, I've consolidated them. And so over the past 4 weeks, I've given you an idea of what I think the top 5 trends might be. And today I'm going to give them to you in an order. I'm going to give you these as a countdown. So I'm going to be starting for number 5. And these top 5 tech trends, I think all hotels will need to at least be considering to adopt if they have not already done so. And that's not only in the lead up to COVID-19 or coronavirus, but also in the post-coronavirus stages. So at number 5, I believe integration of websites, online tools, and artificial intelligence sits as a very, very important tool. That is the global distribution systems, which are industry-based automated transactional systems that offer services between service providers and travel agencies, are a critical point for hotels to be involved in if they have not already. And I'm sure most hotels are using the GDS systems. The emergence following that is the online travel agencies, or OTAs, where the most popular examples might be Booking.com and Expedia, for example, where they charge commission rates slightly lower than GDS, but are also now absolutely important channels for guests to interact with, and in which hotels accumulate their bookings. There's also the meta search engines, which are basically search aggregators, and they've become much more popular in recent years, where online information or retrieval tools uses the data or the search web engines to produce its own results. So you look for information, you decide what you're looking for, and the meta search engines compile that together and return a result. And generally, these are pay-per-click products that are available. And then in amongst that, artificial intelligence now interacts with pretty well each of those technologies. And artificial intelligence or chatbot drives them to pass the multiple sources of information to give your businesses much better insight, or hotels much better insights into occupancy and occupancy patterns. So Airbnb already does this with its host pricing recommendations. It's using technology to look at pricing, look at the current pricing at any one particular week or any one particular day or any one particular season, and provide recommended hotel pricings based on that information. So at number 5, integration of websites and online tools makes this a really important trend. Today, attracting and maintaining guests is an online, web-based, multi-channel, all of technology approach. It's not as simple as it used to be. And these technologies afford our guests the luxury of finding and making reservations for travels or stays in hotels from the comforts of their own home, and reducing the risks of coming into contact with touch points outside of their home. At number 4, there are many, many examples of service automation, but the one that is rapidly changing the face of hotel receptions is the self-check-in kiosks. Guests can now check in, print their own room keys, or download a digital key to their phone and make payments without the need for a hotel receptionist or cashier's assistance. And in fact, some hotels offer no reception services whatsoever. The whole service automation can happen prior to them arriving at the hotel. So this frees up hotel reception staff to assist guests with many other queries that they may have. The technology has been used for some time in the travel industry, and over the past years, I think it's been refined and adapted to better suit hotel usage. Other examples include the use of robotics and artificial intelligence for guest services and food service, and examples of these have been provided over the last number of weeks. So service automation makes up top tech trend number 4, because surveys over the past years have demonstrated that guests in general prefer to take charge of their own destiny and make their own choices. This technology puts the choices in the guest's hands. So let's have a look at a recent design approach to a new hotel reception layout.
So you don't have queues anymore on the desk. You have 6 kiosks, so kiosks are able to check in many guests a day. So our focus is not the hotel, our focus is the guest. So it's easy to use. Everybody from young to elderly can use the system. People look up their reservation by entering the booking number or the email or the name, or they can scan the passport. It's quite new. They can select a room, which is presented by a system, and they create their own room keys. So it's completely 100% self-service, but of course if they need some help, there's always an employee walking around to give the help to who needs it.
So there, that gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the technologies of self-service kiosks, and you can see to the extent to which they're changing and how they're advancing. But at number 3, what about mobile devices used as door keys and digital keys? This is another example of a technology that has been around for a while, and there are already 1.2 million hotel rooms fitted with digital key technologies. But given the technology has been around for more than a decade, it's considered a little bit of a slow uptake. The technology allows guests to receive the digital key even prior to their check-in on their smartphones or device, and use that digital key to open the room doors. The digital key also provides access to lounge areas, gyms and pool areas, all of the hotel facilities that are normally reserved for hotel guest use. So whilst this level of integration of guests can also receive information about hotel-specific offers, safety messages direct to their smartphone, mobile devices such as door keys and that technology makes up my top tech trend number 3. It's rarely high on the list of travel requests. It also provides hotels a link to better understanding or profiling of their guests, and once it needs to adjust services and amenities to meet individual needs now and future needs. And my top trend number 2, mobile convergence and the Internet of Things. And we've spoken about the Internet of Things again over the last number of weeks, but I think this is really a key component as I speak about the top 5 trends. There are approximately 20.4 billion connected things in 2020, and this number continues to grow at exponential rates. The 30-minute talks have previously demonstrated that the convergence of technologies through the Internet of Things is fast changing the way the guests interact with the hotel and all of the hotel amenities. So guest room automation, temperature and light sensors, device controllers, TV and sound, voice-activated devices are all examples of integration and Internet of Things and mobile convergence. This basically results in hotels being able to offer a whole new range of services, including hyper-personalized hotel rooms, location-based information, and predictive repairs and maintenance. There are numerous possibilities that I think shouldn't lead hotels to fear Internet of Things in hospitality. I believe it is a way of the future, and such technology integration is almost unavoidable. And now for my top tech trend number 1, that is the mobile internet and guest apps. And there are more than 5 million apps available from Google Play, the Apple Store, Windows Store, Amazon App Store, and there's about 204 billion downloads in 2019. So apps are becoming a very, very big part of the way we live today. There is no doubt that mobile internet and app technologies is rapidly evolving, and that almost every tourism hospitality provider either developing an app of their own or working with an app provider to brand some sort of generic app that suits their needs. Large brands like the Hyatt, the Marriott, the Hilton, and others are already heavily invested in this technology. So let's take a look at one of those examples. And I guess that gives you a little bit of an example. The Hilton's Honors app is only one of the many branded apps that I'm using as an example today, and what's possible when you actually combine all the technologies and make them interfaceable through an app. And these are available directly through smartphones and through a connection to the Internet of Things and the World Wide Web. The apps access guest profiles and histories, and I'm sure the app, this particular demonstration, gives you a little bit more of an insight into the power of the apps and the level of interaction that they provide to hotel guests. There are a significant number of app development companies, and in this very last slide, you'll see some of the more generic app development companies that work. So hotel brands can either work with them or can use one of their generic apps to work with. But I guess I also wanted to point out that apps are becoming more and more popular. And there's an example of an app that I use and Australians are using right now called COVID Safe. But I'm going to let Andy speak a little bit more about that in his presentation. So in closing, I'm hoping that the presentation of what I believe are some of the top 5 tech trends that affect the hotel and tourism industry today, I'm hoping to give you a bit better an understanding of what they are and how they operate, and give you an opportunity to explore those apps, not only in your learning, but in your everyday life, because I believe they are becoming part of the future. But don't forget, as we've previously discovered, no technology can replace the human touch and the human smile. So I believe technology should only work to make our jobs easier and more efficient. thank you. And I look forward to answering as many of your questions as I can during our Q&A today. Thank you.
All right, Alan, thank you. Thanks very much for that. It's a follow-on to many of the things we've been talking about over the webinars over the last few weeks. It's great to actually see how some of this technology has been rolled out. Now, a couple of quick questions there, Alan. One was, you said, was it 20.4 billion downloads? I missed that figure.
Yeah, 24.4 billion downloads, that's right, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so obviously a lot of people have already downloaded an awful lot of these apps and have got them on their phones. But look, to come back to that, these apps are quite costly. So I can see big chains might be able to afford them, like Hilton or Marriott or whatever. But a lot of the hospitality industry is small, medium-sized operators. What's going to be the cost? Is it going to be possible for other than the big chains in developing countries to be able to use these?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Perry. I think, and that was the purpose of my last slide, just to give our viewers a bit of an insight into a number of the more generic app developers that are out there. I think as apps become more popular, they're obviously becoming cheaper by the day. But the cost of the app, in my view, is returned tenfold in the opportunities and the new business opportunities that it offers to the guests. So I think it should be seen as an investment rather than a cost. I mean, if you use an app properly, it brings along a whole range of new opportunities to the small, medium-sized properties.
Yeah. Look, before we go to Andy, I just got one other question I just saw come in here. It says, what's the implication of integrating technology to the human employees? Will jobs be taken over by machines? Would that contribute to more unemployment? And I know that's been a constant issue that's come up when we talked about technology before. So I just wondered if you've got a quick comment on that before we move on. Yeah,
I do. I think that, as I said right at the end, I see technology complementing the humans that are working in the industry. I don't think that we will ever replace entirely people, but I think the jobs that might be lost in part to the technology will then allow the staff to concentrate on servicing the guest better. So I think there's a whole range of facets around how technology will be integrated. But I think that if it's integrated properly and staff retraining takes place, I think the mundane roles that people do can be taken by technology, but that will allow the staff to free up and actually deal with the human element of hospitality.
Right. Okay. Really good point. Thanks for that, Alan. Okay, Andy. Alan was there showing his COVID-safe contact tracing, and I think that's a good segue into your presentation and thoughts on where we're going with this as different countries are trying to resolve this issue. We spoke a couple of weeks ago about the advent of travel bubbles, people being able to move to different countries. But one of the key issues has been about trying to find out where outbreaks of COVID might happen. And one of the solutions to this is seen as being contact tracing. So looking forward to hearing how you think these sorts of things are going to unfold in the industry. Andy.
Well, thank you, Perry. And thanks, Alan, for the technology is always going to be the key. And we're going to use technology for one more question here. There's before we move into my presentation, we do want to ask a question about the students, attendees, and the faculty that are here today. I'm going to launch a poll asking you it's just 5 questions, what your schedule is for the summer. As we plan ahead for the summer, we're trying to coordinate with the school schedule. So please take a couple of minutes and answer those very quick questions for us so we have some more information. And in the meantime, I'm going to start my presentation. And I'm going to talk about contact tracing and also the challenges that the restaurant industry will have in the next year. This report just came out the other day from OpenTable, which is one of the apps I talked about a couple of weeks ago. And they say that 25% of US restaurants will never reopen. Keep that in mind. That means that when you reopen your restaurant, you have to have all the food, all the staff, everything ready to go. And they're saying that some people will not be able to do that. So that's a key thing. But there are restaurants starting to open up, and I wanted to show you this is from Tampa, Florida, which is doing very well in their reopening. And they are focusing on one thing that goes along with contact tracing. Reservations are required. And they're using that to prevent capacity issues. So some people will come in early, some people will come for a second seating, some people will come for a late seating. But when you use reservations, you also have the opportunity to gather information from your guests, and that's part of the contact tracing. But before we begin, I want to say that contact tracing has some challenges. If you walked into a restaurant or even to a McDonald's or to a Burger King and they ask you for your name, your email address, your phone number, and your home address, would you feel comfortable giving that to them? You know, that's one of the things that is one of the issues of this contact tracing. Privacy. How much privacy do you have? And do they have a right to ask you for that information? And do you want to give that information? And what are some of the challenges? Because government watching where you go, who you interact with. There's also risk of identity theft. That's another problem when you give information to different people. Somebody can take your identity with that information, and then they can steal from your credit cards or hack your accounts. And then also there's a case where someone took that information and they know where you live. So there were some cases where bad people were actually following someone that gave their address and then made them very uncomfortable. So these are some of the issues that I want you to look at as we go through today's session. And you'll see on top I have a QR code, which is one way of coming up with an identification key. And I've actually used it for some of the features of our session today. So let's take a look. Contact tracing. We all want to get back to go to a stadium. We all want to see large crowds. We want to go into a busy restaurant. So let's say that this is you. That's you standing in the crowd. And you're having a good time, but what about contact tracing? I want to talk about first why social distancing is a little bit challenging. Now imagine that's you, okay? All those other people around you. What if one of those people gets sick? Do you want to know? So this is about the importance of social distancing. I found this nice little video. Take a look. If you don't have social distancing, everyone can get infected. But when you have social distancing, your chances of getting infected are reduced significantly. So that's a very good, simple message about the importance of social distancing. So let's ask one more question, because I asked you one question before we started this session. And the question was, do you remember where you had lunch last Thursday? Well, 77% of you said, yes, I remember where I had lunch last week. So let me ask you the second question. The second question is, can you tell me who was sitting at the table across from you? The second part of that. So there were some people answering that already, a couple of people. It's a little more difficult to remember that than who you had lunch with. And the results are coming in. All right, well, actually, it sounds like you know, some people here keep a very good records. 57%, 55%. Okay, we'll let that go for another second. Now the numbers drop down to, let's say 50%. I'm gonna end that poll right there. That's a good indication just to show you, we'll share those results for you. Do people really know who's around them? Not necessarily. So I showed this image a couple of weeks ago. You go into a lunch, you go for lunch with your friends. This is all of you. This is you're having lunch. Now you could be sitting here at table E, or you could be sitting here at table B. Either one of those. You're having a good time. You go home. You're doing fine. But what you don't know is that this person over here got sick 4 hours after that lunch and went to the hospital. So everybody in that room potentially could have been infected. And all the people on this side of the room, what we call medium risk, they were so close to the person that was sick that they had to self-isolate. Self-isolate means that you were close to someone who has the virus, you show symptoms, you got a fever, you started coughing, so you have to lock yourself away from other people unless you get sick enough where you have to go to the hospital. The other group that was in the same restaurant, and you were sitting over there too, this is self-quarantine. You were in a room where someone got sick, but with social distancing, you may not have been infected, but you still have to quarantine. So that's the key of social distancing. And they say at the University of Oxford that digital contact tracing can slow or even stop the virus transmission and ease us out of the lockdown. So you're going to see contact tracing become very popular around the world. How does it work? You're at home, very good. You're with your spouse or with your family. B, you go on a train or you get on a bus or you get on a jeepney, and then you get to work. And there's more people at work. And then you do the reverse and you go home. Very good. Everybody's fine. But what happens the next morning? You wake up with a fever. You go and get a test, and you're positive for COVID-19. Well, if you had contact tracing, there would be an instant signal sent to everyone that you had contact with so that they would be aware that there's a possible contamination. And they would also tell those other people that, yeah, you are nearby, you should watch yourself, but you may not have been contaminated with the virus. And then there's also a note where you can actually decontaminate some places, a restaurant or whatever, a hotel room for that case. So that's the schematic for how it works. But privacy, we talked about privacy. Do you want your name out there? Not necessarily. One way that this works is your phone can have a key. It's an encrypted key. It only stays on your phone. You walk by someone who has a encrypted key on their phone, it stays on their phone. So the communication between the two phones through Bluetooth is talking to each other, but no one else knows that information. But then when you get sick, and with your consent, the hospital now can use your phone and send out a message to all those people that had a key, that had contact with you, and they will become aware of it. And then those people can be alerted to say, yes, you've been near someone who has COVID-19 and you should be careful and do something about it, whether you isolate or quarantine, either one. So that's sort of the purpose of the way this works. Now, there are different ways to do this. In Hong Kong, for example, they have what they call stay home safe. When you get into certain countries, they tell you you have to quarantine for 14 days. How do you know people are really quarantining for 14 days? Well, this app shows you how it works. Now, I shortened this thing so you can see that the app actually shows people at their home walking around so that the people can track that person if they can leave their home. And so what happens is that records your movements, and you can see this picture of Hong Kong. You can see those places where someone, the red dot, has been actively infected in the last 14 days. Now, several of these dots are actually hospitals, so that's justifiable. The green dots means that these people have been in contact with someone, but over 14 days, they haven't become infected. So those places are safer to transport to. So this is a good way if everyone participates in order to track the spread of the virus. So it's a good use of technology. In Singapore, they have a program which they call Trace Together Singapore. They have 1.4 million users, and this uses Bluetooth. Now, if you open up your Bluetooth to communicate with other phones, that's good for this program, but it also opens you up for potential hacking, so you have to be careful there. Again, it shares the encrypted keys. With this app, every time you walk into a restaurant, and if everybody has that app, it tells you that you made contact with, so you will know that if someone gets sick, you can get notified that you were in a restaurant or you were in some location with a lot of people, and those people, someone got ill, to notify you. So it's a key thing to think about. So remember, you were sitting over here and you were sitting over there, but this is the person that got sick. This person got sick on January 24th. You didn't become sick until February 1st, and you had no idea that this person was sick. But with contact tracing app, you could have been notified that same day, and you would have known to quarantine yourself, number one. And number two, if you started to show any symptoms, you would actually be able to take care by going to medical help or taking care of yourself before you got so sick that it became a problem. That's really the benefit of using the contact tracing apps. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is contact tracing is going to be a new type of career in the future. Believe it or not, the University of Houston is offering a training course to train you how to be a contact tracer. You know, you just can't go up to someone and say, guess what? You were sitting next to someone that was sick in a restaurant. You're going to wind up in a hospital next week. You know, that's just not true, number one. And number two, you're scaring that person. That's probably worse than the disease itself. So you have to learn how to transfer information. You have to learn how to find people. You have to learn what the policies and the rules are. And all these things together become a skill for people to do contact tracing. In Houston, they estimate they're going to need several thousand contact tracers. And I've seen a few stories in the last few days where other cities are saying, yes, after everyone opens up, in order to identify pockets of people that have problems, as soon as someone gets sick, contact tracers will go on that section, find out everyone that's involved, notify them properly, and warn them what they can do to apply to do the appropriate health safety. So that's really the key for our session today, that contact tracing is a new feature. It's going to be different in the future. We have to learn how to adapt to it. We have to learn how to use it safely. And we have to learn how to make sure that if someone does get sick, we follow up as quickly as we can so that we don't see another spread of the pandemic. And Perry, I think Perry's coming back after that because we have some students' video questions. Perry?
We certainly do. Thank you very much for that, Andy. And look, I've got a couple of quick questions to follow up with you there, because what you're saying is very interesting. But one of the questions I think has been with contact tracing is just how many people need to be on the system. So how widespread do you think this is going to be in terms of take-up? Because there needs to be a certain take-up rate, if I'm right, for you to know what's going on around you. Is that right, Andy?
It's going to come down to the countries to determine whether it's a mandatory thing that you have to have this app, or is it voluntary? And if it's voluntary, then the more people that do it, the better. But again, it's going to come down to the safety of the application itself, because no one wants to expose their personal information to a wide group of people. So technology safety will be the key. And implementation, the more that use these kinds of apps, I think the safer that particular country or city will be.
Right. Okay then. Well, that's really interesting, because I think one of the things we've discussed in previous weeks is that even once travel restrictions are lifted, the question is going to be is how comfortable are people going to feel to travel to those destinations? You know, are they going to feel that it's safe to go there? And will this become one of those safety aspects about choosing a destination? So that's going to be, I think, quite interesting. Look, we've got a whole lot of different questions and so forth have come in here. So I know, but while I'm just having a quick look through those, Andy, I think we've got some video questions. I don't know, do you want to turn to those? But before we just go there, Alan, before we forget, you did ask a question at the beginning of your presentation.
Yes, I did, and I haven't had the opportunity to go back and look in the chat, but I was going to do that before the session finished.
Look at the chat and see what, because we've got a few people who've come up with some interesting answers. Why don't you have a look at those while we
Good afternoon, my name is Ashana Villabas and I am currently enrolled as a second-year College of Hospitality Management from the University of Santo Tomas. And now my question is, digital contact tracing will only be effective if there is public support and trust. Because of data privacy laws, some people might view contact tracing as a form of privacy invasion, as it can be abused by the companies or the government. And with that, how can we be assured that our privacy is protected through this technology yet still receive its perceived benefits? That is all. Thank you.
Well, that was a pretty good question, I think, and right on the money with some of the concerns. Andy, that's clearly heading in your direction, those kind of thoughts.
Well, again, I think it's going to come down to the technology companies providing a safe application. But the other question Asha mentioned is, what if you go into a restaurant and they say you cannot come into our restaurant unless you use this app? That would be an interesting policy for the restaurant operator itself. That shows the customers that come to the restaurant that we want you to know if someone gets sick, and using this app in our restaurant allows you to do that. And then the customers have a choice. If they go or if they don't go, that would be up to them to decide whether they use that service or not.
Yeah, that's a really, and again, you know, this will be interesting to see how this rolls out around the industry. And as you mentioned, you know, you can imagine being a restaurateur and someone asking, you know, is everyone in this restaurant, is it safe to come in? And I want to know. And we never asked those questions before of people. So this is going to take us into some new territory. Andy, I think we've got a second video question ready, have we?
Yes, this is from LPU. Let's see.
Good day. I am Judia Lisette Paule, taking up Bachelor of Science in International Travel and Tourism Management from Lyceum of the Philippines, University, Manila. With personal information being used by enterprises for many transactions and contact tracing, as future tourism professionals, we must be aware of our data privacy laws. So my question is, how do we self-check and make sure that we are not overstepping and prying for too much information?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the actually is similar to the first question, but in this one, the restaurant has a responsibility, or whoever's using contact tracing, to ensure that the information is safe. Even when you take a reservation today at a restaurant with a piece of paper and a phone, what's your phone number, what's your name? That information can actually be misused by someone. So the restaurant has an obligation to have ensure the policy of gathering information is private, that it's secure, that you take a reservation list that has their name, their email address, and their phone number, and you don't just leave it there for someone else to take out of the garbage, but you destroy it or you file it to ensure you protect the privacy of that guest, because each guest should have the right to privacy when they come into your restaurant, but they also should have the opportunity to be notified if someone became ill during their visit. So good question, thank you.
I think it's just, I went into KL last week and went to get a coffee at my usual sort of coffee place, and as I was ordering it, they said, well, look, before we can serve you, we need your name and phone number. Now, in the past, if I got into any coffee shop and they'd asked me that information, I just said, no way. But now you sort of feel that, of course. And why wouldn't I? Because if someone else in that coffee shop gets infected or one of their staff, they're going to contact me. So it really has changed my thinking, I know, immediately. And it'll be interesting to see how that's going to change other people's.
Yes, and I think if you take it one step further, Perry, I think it's going to be interesting to see how government and regulation looks at personal information and the protection of personal information in the future.
That's right. So I know Andy, we've got a couple of other video questions. Do we want to just...
Mabuhay! I'm Maria Margarita Cruz, a faculty member from the University of Santo Tomas College of Tourism and Hospitality Management. My question is, how can innovations in technology, such as touchless hotel applications, impact guest service? And how can the luxury brand hotels ensure that service levels remain at the highest standard? Thank you.
All right, good question. So thank you very much for throwing that one at us. And Alan, I think that would really come over to you. You've spoken so much about these different technologies. What's your thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you very much, Maria, for a very interesting question. And absolutely. I think that no doubt, not only the large international hotel brands using technology, in particular touchless technology, or bring your own devices with smart rooms and the whole range of the Internet of Things that brings to the rooms and the features for guests. I think it not only improves the sorts of facilities that we offer to guests today, but it obviously offers the hotels a whole range of improved benefits. So hotels will be better connected with what their guests' needs are, with what their guest history might be. They'll have a better track record of what guests' preferences are. And I think that improves guest services in general. So I think that hotel technologies, in particular room automation technologies, technologies relating back to the apps, as I was saying today, not only are good for hotels, but they're also good for the hotel guests, and I believe in the long run will help improve guest services.
Right. Okay, thank you for that, Alan. That's a really good question. We've got before we go to the last video one, we've got one quick one that's come up here. I can see on the Q&A, which is being, should universities review their curriculum to meet the need of the changing market, such as courses in contact tracing? So will we see that as being something that becomes a requirement in hospitality and tourism courses? What are your thoughts on that, Andy and Alan?
You know, actually, I agree that the universities will have to adjust to the new normal, as they call it. And so contact tracing, yeah, that should be part of a class. Hygiene should be improved. Hand washing training should be something that everyone is learning. But not only learning it, but how to manage it, how to implement it, how to ensure that the policies are followed. Those are what the managers of the future are going to have to do. In the future, people, in the past we say you should do this and you should do that. In the future, managers must do that. They must enforce those policies because the risk of failure is much higher than it's ever been before. Before you would lose a customer. Now, if you don't follow the rules, you may lose the entire establishment because of one mistake. So the risk is much higher than in the past.
Yeah, that's a good point to make there, Andy. And I think I was quite intrigued to read a story in the newspaper this weekend about a restaurant in Sydney in Australia that had put in a sanitizer sommelier. And so as you arrive in the restaurant, they have the sommelier, which brings over a range of different hand sanitizers, which you can choose from. So rather than just trying to make it like a policing kind of role, they're actually trying to involve the guest in it and make it a feature rather than a sort of negative side of things. And I thought that was a very clever way of changing that sort of psychology on those sorts of things. Alan, have you just got a quick point before we go to the next question on curriculum?
Yes, can I just pick up on what you said before, and I guess my question right at the start there. We got some really, really interesting answers to the question about what the furry animal was. One was, it's Alan's pet cat. The other one was it's a koala, and there was a ha-ha to do with that. There were a couple of koala questions. One was a possum. That's getting a little bit closer, but actually somebody answered it correctly. It's a quokka, and the person that answered it correctly is Bernard Lester Go. So well done, Bernard. Congratulations to you. Not too many people know of the quokka animal, and it's found on a couple of islands, as I said, Rottnest Island being one of the islands that's pretty close to where I live.
Yeah, and I saw we had a comment in there from Paul in Melbourne, who not only was able to correctly spot the quokka, but also the name of the island. So it wasn't originally Rottnest, it was Rat's Nest.
Rat's Nest.
Because they were very big, very cute little furry creatures. Oh,
Good day. I am Anissa Nicole Marine, Bachelor of Science of International Travel and Tourism Management from Lyceum of the Philippines, University of Manila. My question is, will cash still be used to purchase products and services in tourism and hospitality enterprises in post-COVID new normal?
Yeah, listen, if I can answer that one straight off, Perry, thank you very much, Anissa, for a really good question. And I think the cashless society has been, there's been pressures to move towards the cashless society for some time now. I think COVID-19 and coronavirus is maybe accelerating that. And as Andy mentioned ago, given the risks that we haven't faced previously and the much greater level of risk that we might now face for the future, at least until we have a cure, and that may be some years away, that the cashless transactions in the hospitality tourism industry will absolutely become the norm. I think there's no doubt that contactless payments are absolutely here to stay. The cash payments and handling of cash is something of the past. I know that's going to be difficult for some economies to deal with and for some technologies to be put into place in order to make it as seamless as possible. But I like the question, and I think that anybody that's thinking like you is on the right track.
Yeah, I can agree with that, Alan. That the key to cashless society is we'll move away from cash, we'll move into more technology, but the criminals will actually be trying to hack your GCash cards or your PayPal accounts. So now we have to have new security and new ways to protect our information. and contact tracing seeks more information, but we try to protect their information. So it's a difficult balance between the two.
Absolutely.
Yeah, different countries are moving it very quickly. I was in China last year, and I was amazed at how much of the payment system was there on was being done on phones. And I believe the country of Finland has already worked out a plan to become cashless as a country. So clearly these things are well on track. Well, look, I think this is bringing us to the end of this week's show. So we've got a lot of questions, but I don't think we're going to have time this week to answer them all, but we've got plenty of time next week, where we look forward to you joining us. Thanks again very much for those video questions in particular. We really do appreciate that. We've got to thank our sponsors, and in particular LPU, UST, the Macau Tourism and Hospitality Association, and NQ from Taiwan.
The sports of our sponsors, and we look forward to having more sponsors in the future. And thanks again to our sponsors for helping us put on this program.
Absolutely, they really have been. And so I don't know, in terms of closing comments, Andy and Alan, if you've got anything just to wrap up in before we talk about a couple of the other mechanics of things like certificates.
Yes, if I can just close off by saying thank you to the students for being with us every week, and for your very positive comments. I'm glad that everybody's enjoying the sessions that we offer, and I'm glad that everybody keeps coming back every week. Keep it up. We hope to keep offering a range of interesting and topical webinars over the next number of weeks, and we look forward to seeing you shortly. Next week, 1 week away.
That's right, Andy.
And just to help everyone fulfill our program survey, I'm sending out the link right now to everyone. So this is the survey for today's program. We always appreciate you filling that survey out. And if you want a certificate, those sponsoring schools, this is where you get it. I'm also going to post let me see if this works. Let's see here, hold on. Oh, that didn't go straight. I'm trying to put a QR code in there, it won't go. So actually, I'll put that link one more time in there for you. So this is the link for the survey. So please click on this link and make sure that you complete that survey as soon as you can, get it done before Friday. The next, again, certificates again are for our sponsoring schools. We welcome NKUHT from Taiwan. If you're from that school, be sure you complete the survey. That's where we get the information from you to fill out the certificate completely.
Okay. Well, last week
there was one more question there, Perry, that I think, just if we close off on that, there was a question saying, how do we become a sponsor? So maybe if Andy, you can just mention to people how they can become a sponsor.
Well, that's a good question. I think the best way to do is just email me, and we'll start that conversation. We'll send you some information. Every school is different. Some schools are large, some schools are small. So we're trying to accommodate all the schools depending on the number of students and how big their school is. So my email is right there at the bottom. Please feel free to drop me a line, and we'll start that discussion. And again, the certificates will come out. They'll be ready. They'll be out before next week. And the new certificates are very pretty. So we had some very nice comments from people about those.
Great. Well, look, thank you for joining us, everyone, again. Last week we were talking about cruising. I had my cruise hat on from Costa. This week I'm going to leave you with my more Panamanian type of hat. So thanks again for joining us. We look forward to getting any more questions that you've got, and we've got a lot of video questions and other ones lined up for next week, where again we're looking at current events, what's happening in the world, the changes that COVID is bringing to hospitality and tourism. So thanks again for your many questions. A big thank you to our two speakers today, to Dr. Andy and to Alan. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on top tech and the issues of contact tracing. We look forward to following up on on our webinars in future weeks, and hopefully our next week of Q&A will be answering as many of those questions as we can. So keep them coming in, and we look forward to answering them then. Thank you, and see you next week.
Alan, close it up, Alan.
Thanks, everybody. And as Perry said, see you next week. See you, Andy. See you, Perry. Keep safe, everyone.
And again, we'll look next week. We're going to be answering, the whole show will be on answering questions. So that's going to give us more time to do that. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next week. Thank you from 30-Minute Talks. Have a good weekend. Have a good time. And we'll see you next week for another 30-Minute Talk.